Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by June's Journey. If you're anything like me, folks, you're a sucker for a good whodunit. This second someone's done anything around here, believe me, I am all over it. Same thing when it comes to hidden objects. You hide it, I find it. So it's only natural my favorite game of all time is June's Journey. And my detective's instinct tells me you're gonna love it too. June's Journey is a free-to-download mystery/adventure game set back in the roaring 20s. You and I play as June Parker, amateur detective, collecting clues and solving mysteries in intricately designed scenes from all around the world. They get annoyed with me around the office sometimes, finding all their hidden stuff and solving their little mysteries, so June's Journey helps me stay out of trouble. Give it a shot. Scan that code on the screen and check it out. Please download June's Journey from the link in the description or by scanning my QR code.
It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to another gripping episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, and tonight we're journeying to places no one dares venture, to the edge of isolation, where shadows take on lives of their own, and nightmares seep into the waking world. As always, we thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. If you're joining us on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button and bell icon to stay updated on all of our latest terrors. And for those who crave even more, visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com to become a patron. Enjoy our content ad-free, along with exclusive perks. Your support helps keep the darkness alive. Now, sit back, relax if you dare, and let's turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Our first tale this evening takes us to the frozen expanse of Highway 47, where truck driver Jack Harper finds himself battling more than just the elements. The snowstorm is relentless, but it's what lies beneath the ice that will haunt him. As performed by Nick Goroff and featuring Beth, Gadow, and Aaron Sawicki, I present to you Frostbite by Chilling Tales for Dark Nights creator Craig Groshek.
Part 1. The wipers beat furiously against the windshield, but they could barely keep up with the snow. Thick, wet flakes streaked the glass, clumping together in icy smears that blurred Jack Harper's view of the road. Highway 47 stretched out ahead of him, a barely visible ribbon of white winding through the storm. The snow had come fast, and it wasn't letting up. Jack muttered a curse under his breath and leaned forward, gripping the wheel with his calloused hands. The clock on the dashboard told him he was already behind schedule. If he didn't deliver the shipment on time, he'd be looking at a pay cut he couldn't afford. Outside, the wind roared like an angry beast, battering the cab of his truck. Jack tried to ignore it, keeping his focus on the road. He'd driven through worse storms in his time. Black ice, though, that was the real danger. A thin, transparent layer of ice that formed when temperatures dropped below freezing, often after rain or sleet, or when snow melted and refroze quickly. Unlike regular ice, which appears white or frosty, black ice was nearly invisible, blending seamlessly with the dark surface of asphalt, making it exceptionally difficult to spot, and quite easy to fall prey to. And the conditions at the moment, Jack knew, were perfect for it. His eyes flicked to the temperature gauge. It was plummeting fast, dipping well below freezing in a matter of minutes. Jack frowned. That didn't make any sense. The heater was still blasting hot air, but the cab felt colder somehow, like the storm was seeping in through the cracks. The radio crackled to life, snapping Jack out of his thoughts. A garbled voice struggled to cut through the static.
Hazardous road, black ice ahead, turn back.
Jack reached for the dial, but the message disappeared, replaced by hissing static. Well, that's helpful, he muttered, giving the volume knob a frustrated twist before letting it go. As the road curved, his headlights caught something shimmering ahead. A patch of black ice stretching across both lanes. Jack cursed and eased off the gas, feeling the weight of the truck shift as the tires slid, then caught traction again. Damn it, he muttered, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He slowed to a crawl, carefully maneuvering the truck around the slick patch. The ice gleamed in the headlights, almost like it was wet, but the air outside was far too cold for that. Though black ice itself was a natural occurrence, something about this particular patch made his skin crawl. Jack couldn't quite put his finger on why. A dark shape loomed up ahead. Jack squinted through the snow, trying to make it out. It was a car, abandoned on the shoulder, half buried in a mound of snow. Its driver's door hung open, swaying weakly in the wind. Jack slowed to a stop, his headlights flooding the car with light. He couldn't see anyone inside, but something about the scene felt wrong. Climbing down from the cab, he braced himself against the icy wind. His boots crunched over the snow, but the sound faded as he stepped closer to the car. Around the vehicle, sharp, icicle-like spikes jutted up from the ground, glinting faintly under the lights. Jack crouched to get a better look. The tires were shredded, torn to ribbons. He reached out to touch one of the spikes, but a faint sound stopped him cold. A whisper. It wasn't the wind. Jack stood, his breath fogging in the air. The road seemed to shimmer beneath his feet, and for just a moment, he thought he saw it move. Then his truck's headlights flickered. Jack froze, listening. The wind howled over the highway, carrying with it faint murmurs that made the hair on the back of his neck prickle. He turned back toward the truck, squinting through the snow as its headlights faltered again, dimming just enough to leave the shadows outside the beam dancing. He felt the instinct to leave. Now. Climbing back into the cab, he slammed the door shut and threw the truck into gear. The tires spun for a moment on the slick ice before catching, and the heavy vehicle lurched forward. He glanced in the rearview mirror as he passed the abandoned car. It sat lifeless in the snow, the jagged ice spikes around it gleaming faintly. Jack shook his head, trying to shake off the unease. Just a damn storm, he muttered to himself, gripping the wheel tighter. A few minutes later, he spotted something up ahead. Another car, this one sitting sideways across the middle of the road. The driver's side door was open, and a figure stood on the roof, their arms wrapped tightly around themselves. Jack slowed the truck, his mind racing. Whoever it was, they couldn't last long out here. He brought the truck to a stop a safe distance away, rolled down the window, and called out, "Hey, you okay?" The figure turned toward him, revealing a woman bundled in a heavy coat and scarf. She waved frantically, her face pale and panicked. Jack threw the truck into park and hopped down, pulling his coat tighter against the icy wind as he approached. "Are you hurt?" he asked as he neared. The woman shook her head.
"It's the road,"
she said, her voice trembling.
It's not normal."
Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the ground.
"The ice, it moves. It grew up around my car, and
She hesitated, looking past him toward the road.
it's hunting us."
Hunting? Jack's voice was skeptical, but the look in her eyes was anything but irrational. She was terrified. Before he could press her for more, the wind changed, carrying with it a low, groaning sound that seemed to come from the ground itself. Jack turned sharply, his gaze dropping to the highway. The ice shimmered again, more vividly this time, the black patches shifting slightly under the dim glow of his truck's headlights.
"It's coming back.
The woman said, her voice rising in panic.
We need to go, now."
Without waiting for a response, she climbed down from the car, limping slightly as she moved toward Jack's truck. Jack followed her, his eyes flicking back to the road. The black ice was spreading. He swore under his breath and hurried to the cab, helping her up before slamming the door behind them. "What's your name?" he asked as he started the truck again, throwing it into gear.
"Maria,"
she said, hugging herself tightly. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been screaming for hours. "Well, Maria, we're getting the hell out of here." The truck rolled forward, the tires crunching over snow and ice. Jack kept his eyes on the road, but the black ice was everywhere now, stretching out in unnatural patterns. His headlights caught a faint shimmer ahead, and he slowed, his jaw clenching. The road ahead seemed clear, but he could feel it. Like the ice was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike.
"Don't stop.
Maria said suddenly, her voice sharp.
It'll get us if you stop."
Jack nodded, pressing the accelerator gently to keep the truck moving at a steady pace. Then it happened. A spike of ice shot up from the road, slamming into the side of the truck's trailer with a metallic crash. Jack jerked the wheel instinctively, narrowly avoiding another spike that erupted directly in front of them. "What the hell?" Jack shouted. Maria screamed, gripping the dashboard as the truck skidded on the slick road. More jagged spikes burst from the ground like teeth rising to devour them. Jack fought to keep control, his hands shaking as he turned the wheel back and forth, dodging the deadly protrusions. The truck swerved violently but stayed upright, narrowly missing another patch of black ice that shimmered like it was alive.
"The ice.
Maria said, her voice trembling.
It's trying to stop us. Doesn't want us to leave."
"No kidding," Jack muttered through gritted teeth. They made it past the worst of the spikes, but the truck was damaged. The loud rhythmic thumping came from the back wheels. One of the tires had been punctured. It was only a matter of time before it was completely flat. "Damn it," Jack said. "We're not going to make it far like this." Maria's face was pale, her eyes wide as she stared out the window.
"We can't stop. It'll kill us if we stop."
Jack clenched his jaw. He knew she was right. But they couldn't keep driving like this, not with a blown tire in the middle of a storm. A loud groaning sound filled the air again, deeper this time, vibrating through the cab. Jack's stomach turned as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The black ice behind them was shifting, rising like a wave, and it was coming straight for them. Part 2. The groaning sound grew louder, resonating through the truck like a low, bone-rattling hum. Jack's hands tightened on the wheel, his eyes flicking between the windshield and the road behind them. In the side mirror, he caught glimpses of the black ice shifting, coiling like smoke trapped beneath glass. "What the hell is that?" Jack growled, more to himself than to Maria.
It's alive.
Maria said, her voice trembling.
I told you, it's hunting us.
Jack wanted to snap at her, tell her how crazy that sounded, but the evidence was right in front of him. The ice wasn't natural. It wasn't just sitting there waiting for the storm to pass. It was moving, creeping along the asphalt. "Yeah, well, it's not getting us," Jack muttered, slamming his foot on the accelerator. The truck groaned in protest, the damaged tire thudding rhythmically against the road, but it lurched forward. They raced down the highway, the snow swirling around them in a blinding haze. For a few minutes, it seemed like they might outrun it. Jack's breathing slowed, and his grip on the wheel loosened slightly. Then Maria gasped, pointing out the window.
Look!
She cried. Jack followed her gaze. The ice was spreading again, faster this time, overtaking the road like a tidal wave. Long, jagged tendrils shot out from the edges, curling toward the truck like reaching fingers.
It's cutting us off,
Maria said, her voice rising. "No, it's not," Jack growled, yanking the wheel to the left. The truck veered sharply, skidding onto a snow-covered shoulder to avoid the encroaching ice. The tires slipped and groaned, but they stayed on track. The ice hissed, the sound sharp and grating, as if it were angry. "Did it just make a noise?" Jack asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Maria didn't answer. She was staring straight ahead, her face ashen. Jack turned back to the road and saw why. Another vehicle sat in the middle of the highway, its frame almost entirely encased in ice. The windshield was frosted over, but Jack could make out the faint outlines of a figure in the driver's seat. They weren't moving. Jack slowed the truck as they approached. The ice around the car glinted like shattered glass, jagged spikes radiating outward in an almost deliberate pattern.
Don't stop.
Maria whispered, her voice low and urgent.
Please don't stop.
But Jack's foot hesitated on the pedal. "Someone might still be alive," he said, his voice uncertain. Maria shook her head violently.
No, it's alive in there. That's what it does. It traps you, freezes you. It bites down and drains you.
Jack's stomach turned at her words. He thought of the car he'd seen earlier, of its shredded tires and the open door. He thought of the way the ice seemed to reach for him, the strange whispering sound it made.
Keep going,
Maria pleaded. The black ice was catching up again, spreading across the highway with terrifying speed. Jack steeled himself and pressed the accelerator. The truck roared as it surged forward, nearly skirting the encased vehicle. For a moment, the headlights illuminated the figure inside. It was a man, his face frozen in a mask of terror. Icy, jagged fangs had pierced through the windshield, embedding themselves in his chest and limbs. His eyes were wide, glassy, and lifeless. Jack swore, yanking the wheel as the truck veered back onto the highway. The ice around the enveloped car twitched, as if reacting to their escape, and a sharp crack rang out as new spikes erupted from the ground in their wake. Maria buried her face in her hands and sobbed, her voice shaking.
I told you, it bites them. It traps them and drains them until there's nothing left.
Jack said nothing. The image of the man's frozen face burned into his mind. The truck barreled down the road, but the black ice was relentless. Tendrils stretched across the asphalt, rising up like claws to intercept them, Jack swerved to avoid one, but the truck's damaged tires slipped on the slick surface, sending the rig fishtailing. "Hold on!" Jack shouted, gripping the wheel as the truck swerved wildly. The ice lunged again, and this time it wasn't just spikes. A massive, gaping crack formed in the road ahead, jagged teeth of ice lining its edges like the maw of some ancient beast. The mouth snapped shut just as Jack veered to his side, the force of the impact sending shards of ice flying through the air like shrapnel. One shard smashed into the windshield, cracking in the glass. Another embedded itself in the side mirror, shattering it completely. Maria screamed, clutching the dashboard.
It's trying to eat us!
Jack wrestled the wheel, forcing the truck back onto the road. "No kidding," he snapped. The groaning noise deepened, rumbling through the air like a predator's growl. The ice wasn't just chasing them, it was learning. It was trying new ways to corner them. The headlights illuminated another patch of road ahead, but this one wasn't like the others. It looked calculated. The black ice had formed a lattice-like pattern across the highway, serrated protrusions jutting up at uneven intervals.
It's a trap,
Maria whispered, her voice shaking. Jack narrowed his eyes. "Not if we're faster."
Jack, no!
He didn't let her finish. He floored the gas, the truck roaring as it hurtled toward the jagged obstacle. The first few spikes shattered under the truck's heavy tires, but the deeper they went, the harder it became. One of the icy teeth slashed into the side of the trailer, slicing through the steel like paper. Another pierced the undercarriage, sending a deafening clang reverberating through the cab. The truck jolted violently, and Jack fought to keep it steady. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the frigid conditions. They burst through the other side of the trap, the black ice shattering beneath them. Jack let out a shaky breath, but the relief was short-lived. In the side mirror, he saw the ice melting and sliding back together, the shattered pieces seamlessly reassembling. As they pressed on, the road became increasingly treacherous. More cars dotted the highway, each one encased in icy thorns. Some were barely recognizable, their frames twisted and warped, as if they'd been chewed apart. In one of the cars, Jack spotted another frozen figure. A woman this time, her body contorted unnaturally. Long, saw-like shards of ice had pierced through her torso and limbs, pinning her in place. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. Maria looked away, her voice barely a whisper.
They're trophies. It keeps them like that.
Jack's stomach churned. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but the evidence was undeniable. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just killing. It was feeding and gloating. The ice was everywhere now, spreading faster than he'd thought possible. The unsettling hum had grown thunderous, echoing all around them like the howl of a ravenous animal. For a moment, Jack thought he saw something in the rearview mirror. A dark, indistinct shape moving within the ice. It was massive, stretching across the road with ease. Maria saw it too.
It's not just the ice.
She whispered, her voice trembling.
There's something inside it. Something controlling it.
Jack didn't respond. He couldn't. His focus was entirely on the road ahead, on the next patch of black ice waiting to strike. And deep down, he knew she was right. Part 3. The groaning sound grew deafening, a low, guttural rumble that rattled the cab of the truck. Jack pressed the accelerator harder, but the truck was flagging, its damaged tire thudding unevenly against the frozen ground. Maria clutched the dashboard, her eyes fixed on the torrent of death spreading behind them.
We can't outrun it,
she said, her voice trembling. Then what do you suggest? Jack shot back, briefly losing his temper. If we stop, it kills us. If we keep going, it still tries to kill us. Maria didn't answer. Ahead, the road narrowed, curving sharply between two snowbanks. The ice surged faster, its jagged tendrils rising from the asphalt like the ribs of some long-dead creature. The truck groaned as Jack swerved to avoid yet another patch of ice spikes exploding from the ground. The trailer clipped one, metal screeching as the shard tore a deep gash along its side. Damn it, Jack cursed. The truck fishtailed, the mangled tires skidding over the slick surface. Maria screamed as the black ice surged ahead of them, cutting off their only escape route by means of an impenetrable, glittering wall. Jack jerked the wheel hard, again steering the truck onto the snowy shoulder. The engine bellowed in protest as the truck plowed through the snowbank, the cab rattling violently. Jack fought to keep control, but the vehicle slowed, grinding to a halt as the snow packed itself tightly beneath the wheels. No, come on, Jack muttered, slamming his foot on the pedal. The tires spun uselessly, kicking up plumes of snow. Maria turned to him, her eyes wide with panic.
It's here!
Jack followed her gaze to the rearview mirror. The black ice was creeping closer, its makeshift appendages unfurling like the roots of a rapidly growing tree. The groaning sound grew shrill as the ice spread across the snow, closing the distance between them.
Move!
Maria shouted, scrambling to open the passenger door. Jack followed her out into the bone-chilling wind. The air was bitterly cold, burning his lungs with each inhalation. They stumbled through the snow, the still running truck looming uselessly behind them.
What's the plan?
Maria yelled, her voice barely audible over the wintry gale. I don't have one, Jack admitted. The ice struck the truck. Jack turned just in time to see it happen. Coils of black ice lashed out, wrapping around the vehicle like the tentacles of some massive sea creature. The metal groaned as the spikes pierced the cab, tearing through its exterior as if it were paper. The truck shuddered violently, then stopped. Steam rose from its engine, mingling with the freezing air. The ice tightened its grip, and Jack could hear the sickening sound of metal crumpling.
We need to move!
Maria screamed, grabbing his arm. They stumbled away from the truck as the ice surged after them. The groaning sound now accompanied by sharp, snapping noises. Jack looked back and saw why. The ice had again formed serrated teeth-like protrusions, snapping open and shut like a pair of massive jaws. They ran as fast as they could, the snow dragging at their legs. Maria stumbled, falling hard onto her hands and knees. Jack doubled back, grabbing her under the arms and pulling her to her feet.
It's hurting us,
she said.
It's not just chasing us, it's driving us somewhere.
Jack didn't respond. His focus was on the horizon, scanning for any sign of escape. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of them, a barren wasteland of snow and ice. Then he saw it. An abandoned car sat ahead, half buried in snow. The driver's door hung open, and Jack spotted the faint glint of something on the passenger seat. A flare gun, he muttered.
What?
Maria asked. There's a flare gun in that car, Jack said. If I can get to it, maybe I can... His words were cut off by a deafening crack. The ice had surged ahead of them, rising up in another jagged wall that blocked their path. Behind them, the ice was closing in. Tendrils unfurled like the legs of a giant spider, curling toward them with horrifying speed.
We're trapped!
Maria cried. No, we're not, Jack said, pulling her toward the car. Come on. They reached the car just as the ice lunged. A tendril shot toward them, slamming into the snow with a sharp splintering sound. Jack yanked the door open, grabbing the flare gun from the seat. Got it, he shouted, turning back to Maria. She was standing a few feet away, staring at the ice. Tendrils were rising around her, encircling her like a predator stalking its prey. Maria, move, Jack yelled. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face.
It's not going to stop, Jack. You know that.
Jack's chest tightened. What the hell are you talking about?
It wants us both,
Maria said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes.
But if I stay, maybe you'll have a chance to get out.
No! Jack shouted, stepping toward her. Are you insane? Before she could respond, the ice struck, and a tendril wrapped around Maria's leg, yanking her off her feet. She screamed as it dragged her toward the icy barricade, its hideous fangs gnashing hungrily. Jack raised the flare gun, aiming for the nearest tendril. He fired, the flare streaking through the air and striking the ice. The tendril recoiled, hissing like a wounded animal, but it didn't let go of Maria.
Go!
She screamed through tears, her voice breaking.
Get out of here, Jack!
Jack hesitated for a moment, then turned and ran. The ice was everywhere, surging around him. Jack stumbled through the snow, the flare gun clutched tightly in his hand. He spotted a pool of gasoline leaking from the wrecked truck and stopped, his mind racing. This better work, he muttered. He fired the flare into the pool. The explosion was deafening. Fire soared through the air, melting the ice in an instant. Tendrils writhed and recoiled, the groaning sound rising to a deafening shriek. Jack shielded his face from the heat, stumbling backward as the fire spread. When he looked up, the ice was retreating, sliding back across the highway like a wounded animal. Jack didn't wait to see if it would return. He bolted in the opposite direction, the roar of the flames echoing behind him. Jack's legs felt like lead, but he staggered forward, every step heavy and uncertain. There was no other choice. The world around him was silent now, except for the faint crackling of the spreading fire. Maria's screams still echoed in his ears. He didn't stop until the highway disappeared beneath the snowdrifts, leaving only an expanse of white stretching endlessly ahead. When he finally collapsed to his knees, the adrenaline began to wane, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. For a moment, all he could do was stare at the storm. He didn't know how far he'd run, or how long the inferno would keep the ice at bay. The faint groaning sound that had haunted them faded, but he didn't trust the silence. Not yet. Maria, he croaked. The image of her being dragged into the ice flashed through his mind. Her terror, her resolve. She had given him the chance to escape, and now she was gone. He clenched his fists, feeling a pang of guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. He forced himself to stand. The storm wasn't letting up, and he had no idea how close he was to town. If the ice returned, he needed to keep moving. The faint lights of a snowplow appeared on the horizon, cutting through the white haze. Relief washed over him as he stumbled toward it, waving his arms to flag it down. 2 days later, Jack sat in a hospital bed, staring blankly at the small television mounted on the wall. News footage showed the aftermath of the storm on Highway 47. Cars abandoned in the snow, roads torn apart by frost heaves. Officials blamed black ice and hazardous conditions for the deaths and destruction. No one believed his story. The reporter's voice droned on.
Authorities are working to reopen the highway, but new reports of accidents have already surfaced. Drivers are urged to avoid the area until further notice.
Jack's hand tightened around the cup of lukewarm coffee in his lap. He wanted to scream at the screen, to warn them, but he knew it wouldn't matter. That night, he dreamed of Maria. In his nightmares, she was standing in the snow, her face pale and her eyes defiant. Behind her, the black ice crept forward, spreading across the horizon. When he woke, he could still hear the groaning sound echoing faintly in the back of his mind. It was etched into his memory, and unlike the monstrous entity that had nearly devoured him, he knew that it would never let him go. Epilogue. A young family drove along Highway 47, the storm's fury long forgotten. The road glistened under their headlights, a faint shimmer of black ice stretching ahead of them.
Are we there yet?
The boy in the backseat asked, pressing his nose to the frosted window. 15 more minutes, the father replied, smiling as he tightened his grip on the wheel. Try to count all the icicles. We'll make it a game.
They all look the same.
His teenage daughter groaned.
Maybe if you put down your screen, you'd see more than icicles.
The mother teased, nudging her.
Very funny.
The girl muttered, rolling her eyes. As the father chuckled, the boy leaned forward, frowning.
Dad, the road looks weird.
The father waved it off. Just the headlights playing tricks. Don't worry about it. In the distance, the ice began to shift.
Welcome to 2025, folks. How are you enjoying the cultural revolution? Musicians press buttons instead of playing instruments. Dancers learn their moves from Fortnite, and the bars are now serving craft near beers. What a difference a century can make, huh? With June's Journey, I feel like I'm back in the 1920s. The real cultural revolution, the jazz age, when men wore suits, even on casual Fridays, when women wore knee dusters and Dutch boy hairdos, and when you wanted yourself a drink, you got it from good old Al Capone. June's Journey's a murder mystery / hidden object game set back in the roaring 20s, a bygone era full of charm and style. You and I play the part of June Parker, amateur detective on a quest to uncover a dark family secret. Throughout your investigation, you'll collect clues and solve mysteries in beautiful, intricate scenes from all around the world. If you're a mystery lover like I am, you'll love June's Journey. It's a detective game, remember, so you'll be putting your observational skills to the test. It's got danger, intrigue, romance, but with a kind of sleuthy, laid-back gameplay that's really relaxing. It's also packed with fun features and extras, so whatever you're in the mood for, June's Journey has you covered. Feeling rambunctious? You can compete with your fellow gumshoes in the Detective League. Need to unwind? You can kick back with the Memoir feature, or decorate your mansion. Yes, decorate your mansion. Personally, my favorite part of June's Journey is the storyline. It takes me right back to the real 20s when everything was just ducky. Please download June's Journey from the link in the description or by scanning my QR code. Now available on iOS, Android, and PC. Thanks for your support and for supporting our valuable sponsors. That was Frostbite by Craig Groshek, as performed by Nick Goroff, with additional vocals by Beth Gadow and Aaron Sawicki. A chilling tale of isolation, survival, and a lurking danger that leaves an impression long after the snow has settled. Craig is the founder of Chilling Entertainment and its flagship program Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, which since 2012 has grown to nearly 500,000 subscribers and over 69 million views on YouTube. He also oversees 4 weekly horror podcasts and has had dozens of his own stories adapted for audio. Explore more of Craig's work at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and creepypastastories.com. And with that, let's keep the terror rolling, shall we? One story down, and the dark has only just begun to envelop us. Our next tale takes us deep beneath the surface, where an encounter with a horrifying creature will leave you questioning what's real and what lurks in the shadows. Hold on to your nerves, dear listener. The nightmare is about to deepen. Our second tale tonight comes from Jesse Pullins, an American short fiction writer whose love for horror and suspense shines through every word. When Officer Lisa Regan of Dyer Falls responds to a routine call, she'll find herself face to face with something far more terrifying than a trespasser. As performed by Beth Gadow, this is Lying Awake.
I used to sleep soundly at night. I used to come home after a hard day, shower and snuggle up in the blankets. With the buffeting of a box fan and the hum of an air conditioner, I would lull to sleep each night, fading out of consciousness until my alarms woke me the next day. I didn't stress over sounds in the night. I didn't toss and turn at the unexpected wind and rain or the flash of lightning in a thunderstorm. No matter how trying my day was, no matter how long the hours, I would find sleep quickly and eagerly, ready to face the challenge of the next day. That was until 2 days ago. 2 nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I locked my door, wondering if everyone did. Even if I did, would it matter? Every time I close my eyes, I think it'll be standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I swear I can hear its breathing, labored and heavy with mucus. I feel the heat of its snarl on my neck, and I hear the drag of its claws on the bedsheets. When I open my eyes, there's nothing there. I know it's there, waiting. My name is Lisa Regan, and I'm a police officer in the town of Dyer Falls. What I saw 2 days ago will forever haunt me as long as I live. Dyer Falls used to be a quiet, small town. I thought for a while that the town was perhaps too quiet, although that is every cop's dream. But nothing ever seemed to really happen in my town, save for the occasional speeding ticket or fender bender. Being a cop in this town almost felt like a redundancy. The highlight of the week consisting of cattle getting out or someone having a little too much on a night out. After academy training and staying in shape and studying to effectively do my job, it all kind of felt like it was for nothing. Until that girl went missing and was ultimately found dead in the river. It was a catastrophic event in a town where the only deceased are from old age. Even though the car salesman case was solved almost open and shut, something seemed to change in town after that. Like something had torn in the fabric of our close-knit reality. People kept more to themselves, and the warm welcome of our town was replaced by an eerie chill we couldn't shake. The girl in the river was only the beginning, the struck match to light a kindling paranoia that would only grow in the following year. Once the gloom had settled in, it never left. Like it was there to stay. Whenever it would get quiet again, there would be something disturbing around the corner. Something else to headline the paper, to remind us the normalcy wasn't coming back. A man burned up in his car along with a murdered cat. Unexplained sightings all over town, from the woods at night to busy places in broad daylight. Mysterious lights in the woods, overdoses on deadly drugs, ones that were not only untraceable, but untestable. Reports of something lurking close by. The calls became so frequent, even reports of internet ghosts didn't seem that far off. People began to disappear without rhyme or reason. Some left photographs behind. Others left their cars on the side of the road, the engine still running. Each case runs cold just as soon as it happens. While these things seem unrelated when you lay the reports out, you can't help but feel like someone is punishing this town. The calls of unexplained sightings keep coming. The missing persons flyers are piling up. Our police force is small, and we're spreading incredibly thin. We're all trying to do our part and assure the community that they're safe. Every shift we look up at the sky, and we can feel the dark cloud. How can they believe what we tell them when we don't believe it ourselves? At the start of every morning or late night shift, we wait for the call, for the case that will break us. 2 days ago, I received my call. I'm telling you the story because I need someone to believe me. A vague report of trespassing in the middle of the day, around 5 p.m. Some kids playing around on private property. It was something that happened all the time, teenagers looking for a secret place to drink, smoke, and fool around. The only strange thing was that I was called to a location I'd never been to before. It was on a long stretch on County Line Road, a long, wooded portion that was nothing but trees and overgrowth as far as I knew. There was no road marker. I arrived on scene, pulling my car onto a barely visible gravel drive in the tree line. The path was blocked by posts and a heavy chain, a simple yet effective barrier that kept my cruiser from going forward. I radioed that I had arrived and would have to proceed on foot. 10-4, dispatch responded, the chirp of my radio echoing. I stepped out of the vehicle and traversed the chain, keeping my eyes ahead of me. The path led to a small clearing and what appeared to be an abandoned barn. If I was lucky, it was just kids sneaking off for some cigarettes, but it boggled me how they had gotten in the middle of nowhere without a car. There wasn't anyone in sight, nothing but tall, swaying grass and derelict barn that seemed to be standing solely out of spite. It was apparent whoever owned this property didn't take care of it, and it looked like no one had set foot anywhere near here in a long time. From a distance, the barn looked ready to collapse at any moment. Not only did it look like it didn't belong, the faded gray paint of the outside and the weathered shingles almost seemed rejected by the thriving green grass around it. I worked my way towards the clearing slowly, keeping an eye open for the suspected teenagers as I approached. I couldn't smell weed or cigarette smoke, and the closer I got, the more I thought it was just a false alarm. The tall grass surrounding the barn blew freely, and I couldn't find any depressions in the grass wherever I looked. I kept looking at the barn in the clearing, the long, faded, and peeling structure standing like a sore in the middle of its lush surroundings. Just seeing it made me uncomfortable. It looked just like the kind of kill house you'd see in Hollywood cinema. I checked the perimeter around the barn, the cool breeze picking up as I walked around it. The building itself seemed to radiate cold, and the air around it felt electrical. Something about it felt wrong. The only thing I could hear was the whistle of the wind through the cracks of wood. I pressed my face to the wall and peeked in. Old farming tools hung within, each covered in the heavy rust of neglect. Through the haze of dust particles and shadows, I saw a cellar door. Something nudged my foot and I jumped. I looked down and saw a cat sitting silently at my feet. Its eyes were green and piercing, its fur a distortion of white, black, and orange. It looked up at me and meowed, the wind rustling its fur. "What are you doing out here, little guy?" I asked and reached down to pet it. It didn't look pleased to see me here and didn't make any effort to greet me. Across its neck was a collar with a little silver trinket that read Cooper. I reached for it, but he backed away. He looked in the direction of my car and then back at me. Another meow, this time much slower. His eyes bore into me with an intensity I can't explain. Like there's fire burning in them. The air started to feel chilly and I felt myself shiver. The cat looked toward my car again, a guttural groan seething from the tips of exposed fangs. The wind picked up, and with it, the stench of death. It wasn't until then my eyes noticed something in the thick of the trees behind him. A slow realization of details coming together. It looked just like red at first, but as I focused on it, I started to see the limbs and their lack of skin. It was a pile of body parts, torsos and limbs stacked like a bonfire. In front of me, the cat started to hiss. It reared back, teeth bared as its fur stood on end. I reached for my gun and felt the sickening realization that he wasn't looking at me. He was looking behind me. I heard a single footstep, followed by a grunt. Before I could draw, something knocked me on the back of my head, and my world turned black. I woke to the stench of dirt in my nostrils. My entire right side aches, and I feel like I've been tossed off a cliff. Aftershocks of an unconscious impact rattled deep into my bones, and a delirious panic begins to kindle. I struggle to open my eyes, and my officer instincts fight to ignite. My body tries to obey, each attempt like a failed generator cold start. The gears want to turn, but there's a miscommunication. It's dark, and I'm punished when I open my eyes. All I can see is the absence of light. I try to sit up, my limbs reluctant to obey. The ground feels damp and uneven as I try to push off of it. My head is heavy, and moving it provokes more pain. After several attempts, the best I can manage is sitting. The weight of gravity is nauseating. In the darkness, I spin, trying to recollect something other than this. I reach behind my head and feel the dried stickiness of blood. Feeling the consistency on my fingertips brings static in my mind, and I find myself vomiting. My head lulls as I toss it to the side, and my ears are assaulted by the sounds of splashing bile. In the hangover of retching, I have a moment of clarity and recall the aching stiffness around my waist. My belt, the flashlight, the gun. I feel the cylindrical shape on my hip and draw the flashlight. There's something loose jingling around inside. I press the button and the flashlight produces a flickering, fading beam. The light hurts, but I command myself to take in what I see in jarring, erratic bursts. I'm in what looks like a dugout tunnel. To my left is an old metal ladder, and I follow it up to the ceiling. The shaft to the exit goes up at least 20 feet. 3 details stand out miserably, erasing any hope the flashlight seemed to bring. Halfway up the shaft, the ladder is mangled horribly, twisted steel that would be impossible to climb. Hanging from the top portion of the ladder is my radio, out of reach. The top of the ladder passage is blocked off by what looks like a wooden door. My conclusion is that I was tossed down here, and it's a miracle I didn't break my neck in the fall or gore myself on the broken ladder. The flashlight is dying, and I abandon what's above to see what's ahead. I swing the flashlight to my right and only get a second before I see what is burned into my mind, even after the light dies. The dugout tunnel continues in a straight corridor, but ahead, the dirt is covered in mutilated body parts. I smack the flashlight in desperation and get nothing except the haunting reminder of what lies ahead. My only hope for escape is further in. My legs shake as I climb to my feet, my aching body protesting every movement. My steps are hesitant at first, my knees wobbling under the weight of my ailments. Albeit blindly, I navigate the walls of gore. Bones and pulp crunch under my boots as I feel my way forward, and every noise makes me sink further inside myself. Despite the growing chill, the stench of hot roadkill still remains. I do not know how I got here, or why I trudge forward. I try to use my phone as light, but I can't get it to respond to my finger. The apps open and close rapidly on their own, and the flashlight doesn't work. The signal bars jump from 1 to 4, each lighting individually. I try to reset it, but when I hold the power button, it fails to turn back on. In my hand is the shaking weight of my Glock 22, feeling heavy and worthless in the dark. I can't even recall when I pulled it from its holster. I point it ahead of me as I walk, my finger twitching on the trigger. My eyes adjust to the darkness, although I plead with them not to. Gaining insight into my surroundings only leads to a further delve into the insanity. Empty sockets, sinewy jawbones. My mind tries to piece it together, the reason for the plastered butchery, but produces no answers. Ahead, a tune softly plays, a murmur of direction beyond the meat. In the end, I followed it, not because I want to, but for lack of an alternative. The path behind holds the same darkness as in front of me. I try not to think of the textures my boot soles communicate, but my thoughts refuse the coddling. I feel them poking through the spongy mass I trudge. I think they're marbles or Legos, but I know they're teeth. The thought makes me stumble and I slip, my hands grabbing desperately for something to save me. My fingers hook into a rod-like structure, and my face is stopped inches from the mess that is the floor. My grasp starts to slip, and I correct myself. When I withdraw my hand, a substance follows, stringy and warm. A rib cage. I try to scream, and my gut wishes violently to vomit. The end result is the perpetual half-suck of breath and open-mouth gasping that continues even after I'm moving again. The longer I walk, the more I learn of my surroundings. It's not a hallway or a corridor, but a tunnel, something that had been carved out of the earth before getting redecorated with human remains. I think I'm descending. The putrid cool of the passage is growing colder. My breath disperses into fog and I start to shiver. There's a fork in the tunnel. The left leads to more darkness, and to the right is light. I struggle to make sense of it, the little glimmer outline of a rectangle. It's a door, framed impossibly into the walls of the cave. The sight doesn't give me hope, just a foreboding drone the longer I look at it, like it's trying to signal or tell me something, like I'm going to die. I approach the door. The tune is louder, an old song scratching on a record player. I can hear a loud thwacking coming from within, like a blade burying in a block. I think I'll know what I'll find, but my hand finds its way to the knob anyway. When I open the door, the first thing I see is the large figure standing in the center of the room. Its body is broad, bulging muscles donning an apron glisten from a dingy overhead lamp. The music drones on as he works, a tired record spinning on an ancient player in the corner. Sharp, wicked tools hang from the walls, each stained with evidence of heavy use. Hand crank augers, scythes, hammers. The butchered bodies of dozens litter the room, coagulating streams trickling to a large floor drain. I watch the large blade cleave flesh, separating an arm from its shoulder. From what's left of it, I can see it's a woman, and recently deceased. Steam rising from the freshly pooled blood. Piercing eyes from what I think is a pig look down and admires its work. One of its beefy hands playing in the arterial spray. Its tongue laps like a panting dog, the curve of its smile unnatural and grotesque. Its twisted snout sniffs the air, catching a scent that makes it look up at me. Behind the pig man, the music stops. He looks up at me and cocks his head, moving like an animated nightmare. Its smile widens and one of his pointed ears twitches. I want to hide, but it's too late. I want to run, but there's nowhere to go. I want to scream, but I can only watch. Watch as it squeals. Academy training specifies 2 shots center mass. I give him 4. The gun barks in my hands, my grip slipping against the gore on my fingers. The rounds punch through its gut, 40 caliber S&W hollow points ripping through the surface, only to be halted, like his insides were solid. The bullets only seem to agitate him. He groans loudly and grabs the body on the table by its throat. He squeezes it angrily, a hand the size of my head closing around the windpipe until the dead woman's eyes bleed. He hefts the mutilated body over his head, and with a loud squeal, he throws it at me. As the corpse rockets towards me, I slam the door, and as the body crashes into, I can hear him flipping the table out of his way. A second later, the large cleaver bursts through the door, sending splinters as it chops through effortlessly. I raise the gun and retaliate, firing rounds through the wood to slow him down. He shrieks as I shoot him, swinging wildly before retracting his arm. His other one comes next, punching another hole through, this time with a meat hook. It nearly grazes my face, the door crumbling as he reaches as far as he can. The door barely holds him off, and I light him up again, peppering him until the gun runs dry. Even as a bullet digs a trench through one of his eyes, he does not stop. I turn to run, ejecting the mag and replacing it as he breaks through the door. Despite the many wounds, the pigman doesn't seem to be slowing down. Fear bleeds into my adrenaline as I hear him squeal, an unnatural cry that seems more excited as he gives chase. I'm faster at first, but his heavy footsteps crush through the floor's gore as I slip. My hands shake as I rack the slide on the Glock. I take off opposite of the butchering room into more tunneling I can barely see through. My eyes adjust to the dark, but not enough to see every jagged bone, every strip of slippery meat. I hear his footsteps gaining and I turn to fire. The muzzle flashes illuminate the horror he is, and I watch him approach with every consecutive gunshot. Even as the rounds smack into his chest, he raises the cleaver so high it drags on the ceiling. With a grunt, he brings the blade down, and I feel the wind from the swing as I throw myself against the wall. The cleaver buries into the floor, kicking up a spray of gore and dirt. I raise the gun and point at his face. The pigman reaches out and grabs the gun, his thick fingers immediately engulfing both the firearm and my hands. I pull the trigger and miss, catching a glimpse of his grin as he lifts me off the ground, my fingers threatening to break. He lets go and slams me into the wall with his head, his skull acting as a battery ram that knocks the wind out of me and crushes my breasts against my chest. I fall to the ground, losing my grip on the gun and slipping in the gore beneath us. My gasp for air is met with a colossal boot on my stomach. His squeal is loud and echoes through the tunnel as he watches me struggle. He leaves the cleaver stuck in the ground and holds up the meat hook, running his long tongue over the bend in the steel. I try to crawl away, pawing the dark gore in search of the handgun. My fingers graze a human skull, a severed foot, other fingers. I try to get away, but his beefy hand grabs the back of my neck and yanks me upward. Through gasping breath, I kick and try to scream, trying to do anything in my power to avoid the meat hook. The pig man lets me struggle, a barely human chuckle chattering his crooked teeth. His breath is rancid, a metallic stench of death and decay. I see my end coming in the form of the sticky hook he drags across my face as he savors what comes next. As he toys with me, I desperately feel my belt for something, anything to help me. Empty holsters, handcuffs, taser, mace. As the pigman stares at me with its remaining eye, I raise the can of mace and empty it into his fucking eyeball. The pigman howls against the pepper spray, jerking his face side to side to avoid the mist as I hold the button down. I cough and hack against the spray, my eyes tearing as I exhaust the can. When it's spent, I shove the empty can in his eye, lodging it into the fissure left behind by the bullet. The squeals are broken, almost robotic. The pigman swings wildly and lets me go, the hook catching and ripping the meat plaster to the walls as he tries to dislodge the can. I stumble to my feet and run, drawing the taser as I try to get away. I know he won't be slowed for long. The tunnel moves in a blur around me as I run, my breath slowly returning. Another fork. I go left. I want to wipe my eyes from the spray residue, but my hands are covered in blood. Behind me, the pigman squeals angrily. Another fork. Right. There's no logic behind my direction, only a further descent into underground madness. I squeeze the taser so hard it hurts. Beneath my feet, I start to feel traction. Squinting against the dark, I see the gore is thinning, giving way to metal. The squeals behind recede further away, angrier the longer he can't find me. The smell of roadkill fades, replaced by oil and grease. My boots meet a solid surface, and I'm able to run without worry of slipping. Just as the squeals become a whisper, the tunnel opens up, wider and taller, until I find myself in a vast open space. Machines and metal scrap litter the floor in piles, cracks of light coming from above. Help! Help me! I scream, afraid to stop for too long. My voice reverberates endlessly. I look around the massive room, my surroundings starting to make sense. It's like a factory, but tainted. I look for an exit, but it's so dark, everything blanketed by the shadows of the machinery. I want to hide, but I don't know where he won't find me. I find myself looking aimlessly, the taser pointed in front of me. I hear the throwing of a switch, and the room explodes with light. An orange glow floods from above, and the machines around me roar to life. I see the pigman against the wall, throwing one lever after another, each adding more deafening noise. Gears turn, pistons engage, and hydraulic lines jerk with the flow of fluid. Geysers of steam shoot from crags in the machines. I look around at the spinning blades, flattening rolls, and grinders. Each is caked with the remnants of human flesh. Shredders chew at gnarled bones, and rotting limbs are blended into paste. Beneath my feet, the diamond plate floor is stained with the fluids of 1,000 victims. In the noise and flashing lights stands the pigman, his eye bloodshot and irritated. His mouth is frothing, his face is bleeding. Despite his condition, his smile curls, and I see a bulky, circular saw in his grip. With a loud squeal, he pulls the ripcord, and the saw roars to life with the other machines. Instead of rushing towards me, he slinks away. I hear him rev the saw, but with the barrage of noise, I can't hear from where. Trembling, I duck into the machinery as well, crouching under a table of spinning conveyor rolls. I crawl quickly to the other side, weaving in between machines that seem impossibly built in this hellscape. Concrete is fused with steel in a way that doesn't make sense. Pipes jut from the floor randomly, welded together almost artistically, like everything is patched together from someone's imagination. Somewhere the saw revs, and I duck into the workings of another machine to hide. I crawl around beams and weave past rubber hoses, occasionally looking behind me to make sure he isn't following. Shadows dance from the lights above, a disorienting pattern that makes me dizzy. My chest and stomach hurt, and the smog billowing in the room makes me want to gag. I look frantically for some form of safety, but behind every metal cranny is just an extension of the same industrial nightmare. The beams started getting closer together, forcing me to crawl ahead into a narrow path. I no longer had room to turn around, and suddenly I felt a twinge of claustrophobia curling around me. Behind me, the saw screams. I look back and see the pigman, the angry eyes staring as he ducks into the small passage. The circular saw arcs off the ground, sparks flying off the floor as he tries to duck under after me. I panic and crawl faster, a primal fear spreading as I think of the saw tearing through my flesh. The pigman squealed, the of the saw getting closer as I drug myself along. My elbows knock against the floor and I bump my head off the low ceiling, the passage slowly feeling like a funneling prison. The walls get tighter and the lights start to fade, and before I know it, I'm at a dead end, a cold wall suddenly cutting me off. No. I looked behind me to see the pigman was only 15 feet away, baring his teeth as he drew closer. I pound against the wall in desperation and feel it give. The passage is cut off by a large toolbox, the wheels rusted and locked in place. Move, damn you! I shout, pushing the box as hard as I could. It budges slowly, wheels squeaking in spite. I hear him getting closer, but I don't dare to look back. I try to shove it again, this time throwing my shoulder into it with everything I have. The wheels break free, only to catch an inch later. The box tips over, tools spilling in a loud crash as the drawers empty all over the floor. I hurry over it just as I feel the vibration of the saw eating at the floor behind me. I roll over it painfully, sockets and wrenches skittering around as I crawl to my feet. I feel a rush of relief as I get out of there, only for my stomach to sink like quicksand. The area ahead was just a 20 by 20 open square, completely cut off by concrete walls. Chains hung with hooked ends, hung from the ceiling inches above my head. I had backed myself into a corner. There was nowhere else to go. I turned to see the pigman emerge from the passage, his bulky frame squeezing out awkwardly. He's holding the saw lazily, the same excited smile. This was the end of the line, and he knew it. The only way out is back through him. I look at the floor, at the scattered tools spilled from the tool chest. I holster the taser and pick up the biggest thing I could find, a large, open-ended wrench the length of my arm. Fuck you! I shout, hefting the wrench in both hands. You want it so bad? Come get it, you fucking pig! The pigman pauses for a moment and lowers the saw. He tilts his head curiously. Come on! I yell, ready to swing. His smile widens and he looks away from me at the blinking button on the wall next to him. He lifts a meaty finger and presses it. The floor beneath me rumbles and a glaring red spotlight shines from above. Between my feet, the floor started to separate and an ear-splitting roar erupting from below. Beneath me is a pit, and at the bottom, the biggest shredder I have ever seen. The floor disappears and the pig laughs. I drop the wrench and grab onto the chains above, holding on for dear life as the toolbox falls below. The teeth chew at the toolbox, hammers and screwdrivers bending under the immense force of the shredder. It struggles at the momentary clog, only to speed up and clear itself like a garbage disposal. I scream as I flail in the air and the pigman revs his saw once more, swinging wildly to knock me down. Sparks fly and the chains ripple, the spinning blade of the saw only inches away. I sway on the chain, kicking away every time he swings. I grabbed onto another, but every time I move, I dangle further out of control. My grip is slipping, and he will reach me eventually. I have to make a choice: the saw or the shredder. I look below at the spinning teeth and wonder if I would even feel it. The pigman swings again, this time aiming for the chains above me. One of the chains is ripped from my hand and I almost fall. He revs it up again and opens his mouth, a savage scream rippling from it. Dangling from one hand, I draw the taser and fire. The electrodes shoot across the pit, crackling barbs sticking into the back of his throat. The pigman seizes uncontrollably, contorting hands dropping the saw to the depths below. He bites down on the wires, drool flying as the current shocks him over and over. I yank the tether and he loses his balance, his feet twitching as he tries to stay on the platform. Through the shock, he reaches for me, his remaining eye glaring angrily, even as I chuck the taser into the pit. The shredder sucks in the wires and then yanks the pigman with it. I watch him tumble after, stumbling through the air until he fed the gears himself, shoulder first. They eat at him greedily, the motors struggling as they chew at his body. Skin and muscle torn away with bloody bites, the shredder burning up as it reveals what lay beneath. Under the hide of the pigman is a skeleton of nuts and bolts, pistons and cogs. The shredder eats away at him slowly, sucking in his feet and hands, grinding away at his snout. The pig stares up at me as it consumes him, a look of burning hatred from below, even after the floor begins to return and seal off the pit. The shutters close and I return my feet to the floor, legs shaking from the thought of what remains in the pit underneath it. I duck back into the passage I came from, the machines groaning and winding down. When I return to the entrance of the tainted factory, there's an explosion, like a bomb going off. The walls shake and the floor quakes, and from the dark depths of the factory comes an ear-piercing scream, the squeal of 1,000 angry pigs. The back of the room erupts, a detonation of blood and steel from the shredder pit. The machines peel apart and vacuum to the epicenter of the sound, scrap and bloody bone coming together in a jigsaw puzzle of metal viscera. The squeals get louder as the mass grows, an enormous snout and pointed ears taking shape in a sanguinary replica. The head turns toward me, and a jagged grin peels through the wreckage. A long arm made of jagged metal reaches towards me, the fingertips consisting of various spinning drill bits. I run back into the tunnel, the pig's song booming behind me. The sound of slithering steel grinds throughout the factory, and I hear something converging on me from multiple directions. I push on, tired legs traversing the steel floor that slowly recedes back into sticky gore. The tunnel forks, and I weave blindly, the angry metallic cry following wherever I go. Left, right, left, straight. My lungs burn, my feet slip. I feel the darkness rapidly approaching, a squelching slither along with a single thumping drag. I hear the pig consume the tunnel behind me, filling the void like a tidal wave of blood and machine. I take another left, and the tunnel just keeps going, a deeper descent into an endless stretch of plastered guts and darkness. I keep running, keep pushing, but I can no longer see where I go. I run until all I have left is the slithering behind me and the sounds of my own tired squishing steps, like I'm running in place. A bright white light shining like heaven. The beam cuts through the darkness and starts to strobe, slowly rounding the corner into an unseen fork in the darkness, a corridor I would have passed blindly otherwise. I bound towards it and turn sharply, my boots sliding as I clumsily right myself. The light continues to flash and I follow, mustering every ounce of energy I have left as I pursue it. My legs start to burn and I realize I'm climbing an incline, the slippery texture fading away to clammy dirt the higher I climb. The light waits for me at the top of the hill, and behind it I can see what looks like an exit, an end to the tunnel. Behind me, the squeal shatters the air, an angry cry of malevolence that seems to worsen the closer it gets. It nips at my heels with its drilling fingers, but I keep my eyes forward, focusing on the light ahead and the widening exit behind it. The ground rumbles and the walls start to cave in, the weight of my pursuer trembling the earth as it gets closer. The squeals rattle my ears, but I keep going, my legs shaking as I fight to climb my way out. The tunnel is collapsing. Ahead, the light flickers, and in its wake stands a cat. The sight of him brings back an epiphany of memories, a trespass call to a derelict barn, and a dark cellar within. A calico cat named Cooper. When I catch up, the cat runs alongside me, looking back curiously before diving through a hole overgrown by weeds. I break through shortly after, tumbling to a stop in the overgrowth, exhausted and defeated. The last thing I see in the tunnel is the face of the pigman, skin stretched over a frame so large that it takes up the entirety of the passage. A long claw reaching for me, pointy augers of metal and bone. The ceiling collapses and the squeals fade away like I'm waking from a bad dream. I lean back against a tree, staring at the knoll I just came out of. With the entrance collapsed, it looks like it was never even there. My blood-stained uniform and the agony in my body assures me otherwise. Above, the sun is setting. I hear a soft purr and see Cooper sitting next to me, his piercing eyes reflecting the haze of the sunset. I sit there for a moment and stroke his fur, something he seems to momentarily allow. He doesn't lean into my pets. He doesn't look away from the sun. The only thing he manages is the same low purring. When I catch my breath, I dig my phone from the mess that is my pants pocket. Not only am I surprised when it lights up, it's acting normally, and I actually have service. I hear something in the distance and look up just in time to see a car pass. Not 20 feet from me is the highway, although where in town I'm not sure. I climb to my feet and dial the number for the station, holding the phone to my ear as I head toward the road. When they answer, I start to explain myself in exhausted, broken sentences. I look back at the trees and Cooper is gone. I'm telling you this story simply because nobody believes me. My fellow officers give their support and have been there for me since, but I can see the doubt in their eyes when I speak up. You see, we went back to the derelict barn on County Line Road. We found my car where I left it, parked in a little patch of grass on the shoulder. Everything is there as I left it, no signs of tampering, no evidence of theft. But there's no road leading to the property, no chained-off drive. There's no abandoned property, no derelict barn, no signs of recent activity or presence in the slightest, just an undisturbed forest that goes on for miles. I even lead them back to where they found me on the side of the road. There's no caved-in tunnel, no mysterious cat, no signs of me even being there, aside from my bruises and ruined uniform. No pigman, no nothing. They've given me time off, time to collect myself before coming back to the station and making a proper statement. I also have to undergo a mental evaluation to ensure I'm fit to return to duty. I suppose I should be thankful to be alive, thankful that I made it out. But every night I'm left lying awake. I think of that pig and the things I saw down there. I think of how he wouldn't die, and the machinery that writhes underneath his flesh. I think of all the bones I found down there, how many victims he's claimed, the ones he used to decorate the tunnels with gore. Tunnels that stretch under this entire fucking town. I lay in bed at night and I can hear him squeal. I close the windows and lock the doors, but I know he's still there. I know he won't stop. I'm telling you this just in case nobody ever hears from me again. I will go looking for him. I'll find another tunnel. Someone has to. I just hope he doesn't find me first.
That was Lying Awake by Jesse Pullins, as performed by Beth Gadow. Officer Lisa Regan's descent into that grotesque, nightmarish underworld will undoubtedly stick with me, and I imagine it will stick with you too. The imagery of that pig man, absolutely chilling. Jesse Pullins is a Midwest-based horror author who draws inspiration from retro video games and classic creepypastas. He's also a featured author at Velox Books, where his recent anthology Lying Awake, 20 Chilling Stories of Horror and the Supernatural, was published in October 2024. It's available now in hardcover for $24.95 or just $4.99 on Kindle. The book features terrifying tales like The Papier-Mâché Man, Take One, and The Snowman, blending internet urban legends, horror films, and timeless storytelling. Be sure to follow Jesse on Instagram, X, and Reddit, where he writes under the username A Hawaiian Shirt, and grab a copy of his anthology today. Well, that about does it for tonight. Before we go, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us on this unsettling journey into the shadows. Remember, you can help support Chilling Tales for Dark Nights by leaving us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button and bell icon to stay updated on all of our latest releases. If tonight's tales of icy predation and horrific underworlds left you wanting more, visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com to become a patron and enjoy all of our content ad-free. For as little as $7.99 a month, or even less with an annual subscription, you'll get exclusive access to all of our weekly podcasts, including exclusive content and early access to new episodes. Every penny goes towards keeping the nightmares alive and bringing you more bone-chilling stories each week. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, and as always, it's been a pleasure. Don't forget to tune in every Monday and Wednesday for more harrowing tales, where we'll once again turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Until then, sweet dreams, listener. Sweet dreams.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.